I was born in 1975 under Nicolae Ceausescu's communist regime, and he during that time, in the latest part of his rulership, that was a period of austerity and repression. Because he tried to pay all Romanian national debt. So we had restrictions on everything. So what I remember when I grew up, it was we had scarce resources.
Yeah.
So basically, basic food like bread, oil, sugar, they were rationalized, and each family had like a card that we had to keep with us when we went shopping, of where we lived, how many family members we had, and how much bread we can buy per family, how much sugar we can buy per family, how much oil we can get. So everything was scarce.
Welcome to a special episode of the Cashflow Fight Club podcast in the Champions Corner edition. In this episode, Ligia and I are just going to have a chat about a very interesting topic. So backstory. We've been on a few podcasts and we talk about how we meet, how we grew up. Ligia grew up in Romania, which for me as a U.S. citizen and somebody that's lived in the U.S. really my whole life pretty much, Ligia grew up in a time and a place under dictatorial authority in a communist government, and just has a fascinating upbringing. And so on those podcasts that we've been on, I think time and again, I will say, that's a fascinating topic. And really, we could spend more time. We could spend a whole episode on it. So we thought, hey, why not? Let's do it. And so, at a high level, we're going to theme this Cashflow Fight Club, communism versus capitalism in the arena. And so here we go. You're going to get it all here. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So anyway, this will be fun. It's just going to be casual. Hopefully, I think you're going to get some really interesting, unique perspectives on things. And I know I am. So let's get started. And so I think the best place to start with this is really your childhood. To start with, and then I can share a little bit about how I was raised in my environment. But, as I know it, you grew up in communist Romania at the time of Nicolae Ceausescu, and he was a nasty dictator. Like, I don't know if there are good dictators or bad dictators, but he was like a kind of an evil dictator, not a nice person. And you grew up until you were 15 and the revolution happened. And so really your whole childhood was spent in this environment. So I'm interested to hear, what was that like for you as a kid? Like, not really aware of certain things and all that. So just, let us know, what was it like growing up in that environment?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I was born in 1975 under Nicolae Ceausescu's communist regime, and he during that time, in the latest part of his rulership, that was a period of austerity and repression. Because he tried to pay all Romanian national debt. So we had restrictions on everything. So what I remember when I grew up, it was we had scarce resources.
Yeah.
So basically, basic food like bread, oil, sugar, they were rationalized, and each family had like a card that we had to keep with us when we went shopping, of where we lived, how many family members we had, and how much bread we can buy per family, how much sugar we can buy per family, how much oil we can get. So everything was scarce. The resources were limited to all of us. Even electricity was systematically interrupted, and we had no electricity, and all of a sudden,
randomly,
yes, we didn't know for how many days, how many weeks. I remember studying as a child at gas lamps, and many of these really thin candles that in today's society, I think you see them in Orthodox churches.
Okay.
Very thin candles. Anyways, I remember being raised like that and growing up like that. Hot water, for instance, we had 30 minutes per week every Saturday between 1
for the whole family.
For the whole family.
And your family was not small.
Yes, we were a family of 7, so we were 5 kids, and we had half an hour on a Saturday. My mom was on it. She knew, in that between 1 and 1:30, we all need to take a bath. We all need to, use as much as we can the hot water that was given. But yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. And so I think, as I remember you telling me, even the grocery store, right? You got a ration, and you had a card that said, we have 7 members in our family, and so you get so much bread. But I think, if I remember correctly, you couldn't even be guaranteed that there would be the bread when you got to the store, or whatever you were buying.
Yes, we had to show up with those cards at the designated locations where they would sell bread. And many times we would wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go stand in a long line. And sometimes
the kids, right? Your mom would send you to go stand in the line, right? Yeah.
And sometimes the bread resources, they just stopped. They're like, there's no more bread. I'm sorry. You have to come another day. So that was also not at all guaranteed that you were able to buy bread. I also remember, funny thing, the toilet paper back then, the color, it wasn't Charmin.
Ultra plush
toilet paper was like the color of brown, and you could see these veins of like
the wood pulp
in the toilet paper. And yes, it was very, very different experience.
Yeah, you grow up tough in a sensitive area. Wow. Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I don't think many of us in the U.S. can appreciate that. But for you, I would imagine it was just like you didn't know differently. And so it was just the way it was.
Yes.
Wasn't like a hardship. Even having blackouts, right? We've talked about this. Like, if you have one here in the U.S., it's unexpected. We expect the electricity to be on all the time. And so we're really not prepared. Like, we don't have kerosene or these lamps that burn fuel or candles. Okay, a lot of people maybe have candles and flashlights and things like that, but it's not a routine like it was there. And your mom was very prepared with foods made ahead and other things so that you could, I guess, survive days if the power went out.
Yes, that's a very good point. So my mom became skillful. She had to figure out ways when electricity is off. Water supply was off for undetermined periods of time. We had full water jugs of water supplies and lamps. She had lamps all over the house. So we are prepared for times like this when we never knew when the electricity will be off and when it will come back on.
Yeah, that's interesting. You touched on something that I don't think I've explored with you before, but was Ceausescu in rule when you were born, or at least soon thereafter?
Yes, he ruled Romania for 24 years, starting 1965 until 1989.
And was he good at some point? Like, I think I've remembered you telling me that your mom will mention, and maybe it was before Ceausescu or some other trigger, but before, things were very good. Like, there was an abundance of resources and people lived a good life, or it seemed like a better time, at least.
Yes, what we understood from our parents and the people we were surrounded with, and then history, was that in the beginning of his rulership, he had a very liberal approach. He encouraged entrepreneurship. He encouraged personal growth. He wanted to provide housing for everybody. But then in 1971, he decided to visit a few of these communist countries like China, South Korea, Mongolia, Russia, and he became extremely infatuated or impressed with the rulers' personalities, and he initiated the July thesis in 1971, and since then a very drastic revolution happened.
Mm-hmm.
Where they started, obviously, the brainwashing of population, the austerity and repression started. We were totally closed off to the world. We had 2 hours of television in the evening, and between the 2 hours, the first hour was they showed all these
Real
hymns.
Housewives of
Not
Romania.
Real Housewives.
No.
Not Real Housewives of Romania, but they showed all these parades and basically worship.
Yeah, nationalistic programming, more
Yes.
propaganda-ish.
Yes. And then they would show sometimes the political leaders' speeches, and a few times movies that were very communist and in nature.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned something about, I get my perspective of it, at least leading up to the revolution in 1989, was that Romania was somehow almost like a servant country or a puppet country to the Soviet Republic, or somehow is that not the case necessarily, or like serving the Soviet Empire in some way, or sending money even? I'm not sure.
Well, Romania became like an industrial giant, so there were a lot of factories built to pay the Romanian debt. The debt, national debt. And I don't know, I cannot speak intelligently where we had that, who we had that with.
Yeah, but. Okay. Yeah, interesting. But at some point in there, I guess Ceausescu had an epiphany, or he saw, there was some, during that time of the world, as I understand it, there were some pretty brutal dictators, and I guess he became infatuated with it. At the same time, he lived the life you would think of a dictator, right? He had a gold palace, and his family lived with opulence, and there was no scarcity at the upper levels of society. And
definitely, we didn't know that back then. In 1989, after the revolution happened and he was killed, they showed his palace and their house. They had gold features, gold.
Light fixtures and chandeliers.
Yes, and their daughter had she had a pet, a dog, and she had this scale made of gold that she would weigh her dog's food on this
golden scale. How practical!
Scale,
yeah,
and yes, they lived a very lavish life.
Yeah, so. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on my childhood because I think it was much like probably most of the people that are listening here, but I lived probably what was considered middle class back then. I mean, maybe, I don't know if we were upper, lower, whatever, but, we weren't wealthy by any means, but I didn't anyway feel a lack. I mean, my parents certainly weren't just buying anything. There was a lot of times when they're like, oh, we can't afford that, or we can't do this, or they wouldn't do it. But my mom was a teacher, made a decent salary. She was there for my sister and I in terms of before and after school and summers and things like that. My dad was very entrepreneurial, had just a lot of different businesses as I think back on the years. And then in the main part of my childhood, he was a home builder. Like before that we were like the original home flippers. We would buy a house that was broken down and fix it up and then sell it, be on to the next one. And my mom will tell me that we were in 31 houses in 30 years. So just it was a lot of movement. Yes. And then I think in my teenage years, one of the suburbs, Arlington, Texas, kind of took off, and my dad just started doing home building as a general contractor. And we had means, like, we had a boat, and a decent lifestyle. We took some vacations and stuff. So probably not unlike a lot of people, and like you would expect here, we enjoyed a lot of freedoms. We didn't have to stand in line at the bread store. I think the worst time I can remember was in the 70s when there was a gasoline shortage. I think the OPEC countries were clamping down on oil at the expense of the U.S. and there were long lines at the gas station. They would run out of gas and those kind of things. But that was about the worst of that similar type of story that I can remember. Transitioning a little bit, I would say, let's talk a little bit about your family life. So I know your mom and dad both worked. You guys had an apartment in a smaller village. Talk about that a little bit, like how your dad enjoyed some privilege based on his job and got certain things. Also, Christianity as an important part of your family's roots and how that was subversive, or you had to hide that in a way in your society. So kind of those things.
Yeah. So my whole childhood and our family life was under this scarce umbrella. Basically, everything was scarce. I remember times where my parents would tell us stories about their friends owning a home, inherited a home, and because the regime would target areas where they wanted to build apartment buildings, they would come at your house, they would shop at your house, the secret police, and they would say, you no longer own this home. We're going to tear it down. We're going to build an apartment building here. We're going to assign an apartment to you. But there was just no security. And my father worked in construction, and he was a construction auditor. And because a lot of people needed his favors and approvals, he had a little bit of a bigger status when it comes to obtaining favors like that. Yeah. So when he I think it was like a long waiting list for apartments. They were built, and he wanted this particular apartment. We were a bigger family. We had 5 kids, so he wanted to have 3 rooms. Back then, it was a big apartment to have 3 bedrooms, and and he got it. But he knew, we were all aware that it was a favor, that in normal circumstances you would not obtain an apartment like that. And then I remember, obviously, when I grew up, my parents were Christians, and Christianity was illegal in Romania. So it was illegal to go to church. It was illegal to be in any relations with other Christians. And I remember.
So how did they come to be Christians?
Both sets of my grandparents were Christians. So they grew up as Christians.
And at some point, was it okay?
Yes.
And then it became okay. So like Ceausescu or somebody said.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And I remember times we were in church. We were at the Sunday morning service. And back then it was also Sunday afternoon. And people from the secret police would come in the church and would stop the service and send everybody home. There was another aspect, was that trust was non-existent back then.
Yeah,
you couldn't trust your friends, you couldn't trust your family members, because the secret police wanted people to inform, wanted to recruit informers. So you never knew who's going to tell on you what you're doing. Back then, my dad was very involved in helping missionaries that would come from other countries to smuggle Bibles in Romania and other Christian literatures. So he was very involved with that. And we don't know who, but somebody informed the secret police about what he was doing. And we found many times that
you got a fine?
No, we did not get a fine.
No.
But I remember there was one evening when the secret police came at the door. There were like 3 very intimidating men. And they took my dad to the station, beat him up, and sent him back home the next day. And because they were informed that my father would help missionaries smuggle Bibles in Romania. So the trust...
Probably without evidence or facts or anything, even though he was.
He was, but they didn't need any evidence and facts. And there was just this sense of... The sense of community wasn't there. It was, in a way, we helped each other, but you never knew who you could
you were
trust.
always a little tense.
Yes, always very tense, even among family members. You just never knew. And many of those informers were giving favors, promises for a better...
Incentives to inform, Interesting. Wow. Yeah, nothing like that in my childhood, really. We were kind of free to go to church, bought homes that we wanted to buy that my parents could afford, and things like that. So that was, as I'm sure you can imagine, much the same way it is today, right? It's not too different. But to that point, like, let's talk about how that shaped my and your personality, your outlook on life. Your money story is big element in all of us. Like, for me, interestingly enough, although my dad was super entrepreneurial, my imprint was more on my mother's side, where she was a teacher with a salary, benefits. Her mom, my grandmother, worked at a family bank. It was her family's bank. She became an officer. And so at an early age, I had savings accounts. And even every Christmas, my grandmother would give me and my cousins coin sets. Like each year they would come out with a unique little set of coins. And so my world was very much around savings and bank investment instruments like bonds and CDs. And I, for whatever reason, enjoyed the fruits of my dad's, because he was later in life very much the breadwinner in certain ways. But that just, I went to school, university, and thought, okay, I should be a doctor. I should have a high-paying salaried job and just live that life. And never even really remotely entertained the idea of starting my own business or investing in real estate or doing those kind of things. And so, that was my path. And then I would say my money story was a little bit of a safety oriented, like I wanted to have money in the bank. I mean, when I was a kid, when I was a young adult, 18, 19, 20, okay, well, guess what? I go to the university post office box and there's credit card applications. And, the things, there's almost this very, very soon pull into the world of consumer debt. And I did get into consumer debt and carried that with me for a decade at least, just like oppressive debt. And that certainly has shaped my money story as well. That's why I don't like any debt today. And I just, want things paid off and things. But I kind of have this security through employment mindset and make safe, secure investments. And it was only later in life, when you and I embarked on a different path that my mind really awakened to those kind of things. But how would you say you were informed or shaped by your experience? And so we fast forwarded a little bit, but the revolution happened in 1989. You were 15 years old. Maybe spend a little bit of time talking about what that was like in society. What happened? I mean, that was kind of an instantaneous event, right? I mean, the society, for various reasons, I think the information age started catching up and people were getting outraged at how the society was being repressed, yes, and rebelled. And it ended in the assassination of Ceausescu, his family, or at least his wife, and others. But kind of how was that socially for you guys? Did life change immediately?
Yes, obviously. So up to I was 14 when revolution happened. Obviously, before then, we were living in survival mode. There were times when there was just the grocery stores did not have any food. Even if you had the money to buy, there was no food supply to purchase. I remember my dad going one time. He started crying because he didn't know what we're gonna eat for dinner. He would go out and he found like some potatoes on the street and brought them home and told my mom, I mean, with tears in his eyes, that he found some potatoes on the street that they could make
tears out of happiness, like happiness. There were calories coming into the family.
Yes, and also I would imagine that as a father to go through that, like you had no idea what you're going to feed your kids that night, must be devastating.
Yeah.
But we grew up in a survival mode, so up to then, when revolution happened, there was like an overwhelming. There was overwhelming amount of resources coming our way.
Wow.
So
really?
there was, all of a sudden we received packages of food, of canned goods and
from the world, from people.
From the world, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Like different organizations, I'm sure back then they had their resources and their supplies, and we started really receiving a lot. And to be open to the world and to see on television events and what happens, and it was just overwhelming. We just didn't know what to do with that. And I think so we started obviously transitioning to a more normal life where grocery stores had food supplies, and we were able to buy things. But obviously the salary level was different back then. We had very low salaries, and we were only able to buy food, and that's it. So I think I have developed a very poverty mindset beyond scarcity. There was like a very poverty mindset. When I look today at young kids, 12 or 13-year-old walking through the mall and deciding what am I going to buy, like I've never had that challenge.
With an iPhone.
Yes. We had uniforms when we went to school, so everybody was dressed the same way. And when the revolution happened, that restriction was lifted. Kids didn't have to wear uniforms, and all of a sudden you could see it was stressed. It was like, what am I going to wear to school? There was no such thing as a mall. There was no such thing. I didn't even see a pair of jeans. I don't even remember when I first saw the pair of jeans. But it was also a different type of stress, because all of a sudden we were like comparing with each other. Oh,
right.
So and so
has a brand or
has money. We were not even aware of brands back then, but they have nice clothes, and I don't have nice clothes, and we were just starting to compare. But it was overwhelming, I remember, and we're just trying to figure out how to make that transition in such a way that to adapt to the new environment.
Yeah, and so your dad worked for the government in a sort of way.
Yes.
In construction. Did that transition continue? It just was a different government?
He did continue to work. Yes, the transition in the government happened quite slowly, so he was able to keep his job. When definitely my father and many of the people that lived under the communist regime, their dream was to get out and
out of the country,
yes, and offer their families a better life. And when revolution happened, my dad saw a way. I want to get out. So he didn't stay long in that transition.
But you still had to have, it wasn't just like you could freely leave the country. You still had to have visas, and the government had to approve. Yes, absolutely, you can leave. And so, he had struggles in those regards as well. And the family couldn't go. It was like, okay, you can go, but you're working. And
yes. Because under the Ceausescu, whoever were the people that were successful in leaving the country secretly, crossing the Danube River or
through forests or whatever.
Whatever. And they would find and seek political asylum in different countries. But after the revolution happened, that wasn't the reason anymore. People could not find and seek for political asylum easy to obtain
passage into another country.
Another country, or to obtain. You had to find it different ways.
Interesting. Yeah, and so I can see how that would give you a scarcity mentality and an acceptance almost of living with little to no means or need for.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, the needs were we didn't even we were only operating it. What do we need today? It wasn't the verb want wasn't even in our vocabulary. What would I want?
As kids, maybe. But,
yes, as kids. And definitely, I think that shaped my money story and my mentality when it comes to money. The best way for me growing up was the best way to save money is to put them under the mattress. Like there was
not even in the bank. Yeah,
not even in the bank, under the mattress. To have back then, obviously we only dealt with cash. There was we didn't have bank accounts, or we didn't have credit cards. So
you
that
guys
was the best way to save money, in my opinion. Keep it under the mattress.
But that reminded me, and I don't know what the year or years were, but you had these hyperinflation events, right? Like I don't. What was that? Yeah. Soon after the revolution, where the $1 equivalent became $10,000 equivalent or something, and then they reprinted money to have bigger denominations because you couldn't carry enough money to get a loaf of bread or something.
And I was more aware of the inflation when I turned 18 and started working. I had a certain salary, and I could barely buy food for the month.
Yeah. Wow, fascinating. I guess so. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you went to school, you got out at 18, and you were able to find work various places. I mean, I know you and your siblings lived in a smaller village as a kid, but then Cluj, the second biggest city there, you guys, most of you, it seems like all of you kind of lived there in the city, where I imagine work driven. That's where you could get decent employment.
Yes, and definitely we wanted to move to the bigger city because the opportunities were bigger there. My parents were able to provide us with 2 apartments. My dad worked overseas after the revolution, and he bought 2 apartments where we split. Like we were 4 girls, so 2 of the girls lived in one apartment and 2 lived in the other. And I think my brother was still with my mom. But we were able to live for free actually in my dad's apartments. We only paid utilities, and we looked for jobs there as there were bigger opportunities. And I was able to find work, I think, pretty easily back then. I would say I don't think I had a lot of time not being able to find work, but it was
just wasn't for a very big salary or a very big wage.
Just for a very, very small wage.
Yeah, because even not having a housing cost, you're saying there were times when you really couldn't afford to even buy the food.
Right.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just kind of a very totally different worldview.
Yes, and I think another way that impacted us, the fact that we were living in a survival mode, that totally inhibited our creativity, or at least I can speak for myself. I didn't have big dreams about going to university afterwards or going to doing something big for myself. I didn't know. I was still in a survival mode. So my creativity muscles were not at all developed. And I couldn't dream. I felt totally paralyzed and couldn't dream to do much more. But in my future was, I'm just going to go get a job or 2 or 3, pay my bills and survive.
Right. Yeah, that's, there's something to that, because I will share a very small similarity in that, in my early adulthood life, I got in credit card debt, and then you get a house and you get cars, car payments, kids. There were moments when I did have creative thoughts or a spark of interest where I would think, oh, that would be so cool. But I was so underwater that I had no room to even imagine how I would transition out of a job with upward mobility and good benefits into a risky venture. Even if it was on the side, it was, kind of a hard thing. There was no money to get a jump start on things. And so that aspect of really living thin or very tight, it can, let's say, it doesn't have to, but it can really squash your creativity and your dreaming ability. There are many people that we've met even that are young and making it happen, right? They're getting out there and doing it. Conditions slightly different, but it can be done. Not saying that just because you're in this situation, you can't dream. But,
Yes, that's why I wanted to make the point that for me, that was the impact that had on my life, because I know of people that totally rose up from that environment and changed their lives for the better. But for me, that was the impact that it had.
Yeah, fast forward to, I don't know what time frame, early 90s, I guess, when you were entering the workforce and doing all that. When I came to Romania in 2006, it was incredible. It just felt vibrant, and there were entrepreneurs and business owners, and it just, it was really an interesting, for me coming there, it was such an interesting mix of, you see the gray communist apartment blocks still there, but then you also had, Cluj, the city with ornate, old, centuries-old buildings in the downtown, and then the homes that radiated out from the city. Very nice, palatial homes in some senses, and all just mixed together. But the mood of the country, or at least of Cluj, was it was fun to be a part of. It just felt really growth oriented, and people, for the most part, seemed happy and alive and stuff. And then, unfortunately, we had the 2008 Great Recession where everything kind of went down, and it tamped the flames of all of that to some degree. But still a very vibrant place. In fact, I found, for me, that experience was beautiful in so many ways, right? We met each other and have what we have now. But that was, for me, a very transitionary point. I was coming out of a failed marriage, but I was able to rebuild my finances, like just to kind of clean house, start fresh. My creativity did spark in many ways. I saw other people doing things, revisited some Rich Dad, Poor Dad, some literature where we started thinking about, okay, there is a different life that can be crafted, and investment income and different types of things. But it was what a transition from having lived through two completely different environments and worldviews.
Hearing about the way you grew up seems like in your early childhood or in early adult life, you were more influenced by your mom, my kind of the poor dad mentality, seeking security in a certain way. And then later on, you were kind of sparked by the influences that your dad gave you in his life of going out there, risk it, trying, being an entrepreneur. Is that correct?
It is at a certain level. I don't know. I never really, as a kid, viewed what my dad did. I knew he had Mike Deaton Construction, and so, it was kind of cool to see. We'd go out and there'd be signs in the yards of these new homes, and there'd be blocks of them with all his name and sign on them. So it was. I did at some level know that he was a businessman, but and he invited me in to his business as an employee. Like when I was a teenager, I would say I got my work ethic. It's fair to say. So like financially and economics, I did. My mom took a strong hand in setting up bank accounts, in teaching me how to balance a checkbook, in making sure we were depositing money into the savings account. And so she was almost my mentor in that way. But from the time I was 13, my dad would put me to work. I was mowing yards at 13, 14 years old. And then as I got older, working with his subcontractors, cleaning houses, roofing, concrete work, different elements of the business, but not the business. Right. It just wasn't. I never really took an interest in wanting to know about the business. So I'm not slighting my dad in any way, but it just, for some reason, it was shielded. And then I just entered the workforce. And then, yes, later in life, I think I grew more of an awareness and appreciation. And my dad and I are close, as my mom and I are, but we talk about his ups and downs. And he's a man of strong faith and always believes it's going to work out. Something's going to happen. And he has. He's been an employee when he's had to be an employee. He's worked for companies and in addition to being entrepreneurial. So I did gain more of an appreciation and awareness for risk taking and having faith that and I think our relationship also has helped me a lot in that way, in knowing that you're supportive, even if we try something and it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. We'll start over, or we'll get jobs or whatever. It's that confidence and that security on top of, for me, some financial stability where I know, okay, at least for the next 12 months, we're pretty good. And even in our current job, right, we have cash flow coming in that we know is going to come in for years to come. And so that really, for me, opens up a world of possibility. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how strongly we're shaped by the way we're brought up and the things that lodge in our brains, the key phrases, money doesn't grow on trees, all these things. And
yeah, it's very, very, very interesting. Reflecting back a little bit on my mom and dad, I realized I was closer to my mom, maybe by nature of things. I think children, mostly girls, are closer to their mom. Watching her, she was very similar to your mom. For her, always she looked for security in a certain way, and today she still does. Having a job, she was an accountant. She worked in a bank. She had to have security, and I did not appreciate my dad's traits at that time, but lately in life, and after he passed, unfortunately, I started to really appreciate his spirit. Like, he was always a rebellious, but not necessarily in the bad way. Like, he was
seeking more.
He was seeking more. He never wanted to be confirmed. I remember telling that story that the secret police would come at the church. My dad was the first. And he took his shoe one time. He took his shoe off and said, "I'm going to kick your head with this shoe if you're not getting out of the," and he couldn't have his way just because the secret police was powerful back then and they shut us down. But he was always a man that would rise up in the middle of the crowd, and he would stand for what he believed. And I started to appreciate those kind of traits later in life. And he always looked for...
It's okay. You told me a story one time. He came to your school, and so as a young kid, it was embarrassing, right? You're like, but looking back on it, you can appreciate all those things. It's okay. No, it is. I think,
and I can appreciate today in our lives, like that spirit of, hey, I don't want to be conformed in this situation. I don't want to stay confined and limited.
Yeah.
I can rise up and move on.
And looking back, do you think, I don't think you know, but do you think, does that come from his family and what he witnessed through that, and or through his faith and lessons there? Or where do you think that came from in his personality?
I definitely think probably some portion of it through his family.
Didn't you tell me your grandfather or your uncle or somebody was imprisoned?
Yeah, so he had an uncle that was he was very involved politically, and he went to prison for 17 years. So there was something in the family, that rebellious spirit, that wanting to do more, not wanting to be conformed to the norms. It was there. His grandparents were religious Orthodox priests, and my grandfather, so his dad, wanted to become a Christian, and he was totally kicked out of the house, was disowned. He was not part of the family anymore, and he was only 17. And so I think there is in the blood.
Yeah. Is that why you're so bossy with me?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's definitely in the blood, and definitely he was witnessing people that took a stand for what they believed, no matter what would happen.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely a spirited man. I mean, I enjoyed getting to know your dad, and I also appreciate the stories of wanting a better life for you guys. I mean, just the things that you've recounted to me, and the stories that he's told about going to Austria and Portugal and coming to the U.S. and doing what many I'm going to say European, some of the poorer European countries, but it's worldwide, right? I mean, there are so many people that want so much better for their family that come to the U.S. They go to the Western countries in Europe and send money back, or work as long as they can and then go back and provide. So many people were able to give a boost to the family, and at a sacrifice, right? He was gone for months at a time, if not years. I don't know, but
he would be gone for months at a time, and would come home to visit, but he definitely was living months at a time away.
Yeah, big sacrifice.
Yes.
Which, I think so many people do and want and have a drive for a better life. And I certainly feel blessed. Yes. It kind of what I grew up in, and also what we've put together in terms of our own journey.
And really, I think for me, looking back at both sets of our parents, they did the best they could in their circumstances. Yes. And I'm always grateful for that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, ending with gratitude is great. That's probably, I don't know if you have other areas to explore. That's a bit what I wanted to just mine into the communist dictatorial. One thing we haven't talked about that I guess we could, and I do think this is interesting as well. So you and I married and moved to the U.S. In 2010, 2011. And I had a job that I came with or to. I kind of switched jobs right as I came. But it was fairly seamless, same company, just a different role. But how, talk about, I guess, Romania relative to the U.S., because you also had come to the U.S. I don't know the years, I don't remember, but you came and worked for an extended period of time, an overextended period of time, actually, to work in the U.S. And then we came back. Mm-hmm. But just how would you describe your experiences in those two capitalistic environments, but different ones?
Yeah, so I was definitely overwhelmed seeing the lifestyle that Americans have. And
because the first time you came to Naples, Florida, which is maybe not representative of most of the U.S., but it's a.
I came from. I went to Naples, Florida. I worked as an au pair for 2 years, and this family had $1 million mansion on the water. their, obviously that wasn't the representative of the middle class American family.
Yeah, but what could be?
What could be? But I had friends. I had Romanian friends that I knew back then in Naples, and I remember I was just overwhelmed of the difference of lifestyle and how many opportunities people have here. Really, how much opportunity there is. And back then, I would make in a month doing babysitting as much as I would make in a year back home. And I kind of knew this is not a lifestyle that I can afford or sustain for many years. But it was just mind-blowing to me that I can make in a month how much I made back home in a year. And
which drives so many people to come to the U.S. or to England or the other, more
opportunity.
Yes,
a better life, a better lifestyle.
Yeah, the developed nations of the world or whatever.
And then obviously we got married, came here, integrated in the society, and I I don't want to offend anybody, but I feel like the society is extremely entitled. Compared to the society that I grew up in. Now, I go back these years, we go back to Romania and visit my sisters and my brother family, and it feels like they are totally changed. They are very entitled. So it's I think it's more of a generational gap. And
when you say entitled, just so people don't get the wrong idea, maybe it's a standard. Like there's a certain expectation of standard that is available to people. It's not that they expect people to give them things in an entitled way. It's more this concept of a standard of living.
Yes, thank you for saying that. It's more of a standard of living. And I mentioned before, my poverty mentality kicks in, which I don't think it's healthy. I need to work on it. But my poverty mentality makes me be limited. I have a hard time doing the things that I want to do. I'm very geared towards needs and towards practicality. And I have a hard time letting loose. And I want to do that. I really want to get this. I really want to buy this for me right now.
Right.
I have a hard time. And I find myself judging when people their life is all about their wants. But obviously, yes, I think you make a good distinction between, I don't mean entitlement like they expect people to give them everything on the silver platter. It's just that they're
I expect to be able to have a good job, to be able to invest, to be able to buy a home, to do all these things by doing it, but not.
I have a very good friend, and she mentioned in one of her speeches one time that it's her God given right by birth to be wealthy. Well, that was extremely foreign to me. That was extremely foreign to me. And if I would go there, I remember times when I was angry with God. Like, why would I be born in Romania and other people be born in the U.S.? And all these existential questions that you ask, what did I do? I didn't choose to be born there. I'm very grateful today that I was born where I was born and grew up the way I grew up, because I can see the benefits and I can see the wonderful lessons that I learned. But I remember that was the biggest shock, to see that people had a totally different standard of living, different expectations out of themselves, out of the society. And I felt like I really have to step up to that game to learn how to not just stay in the survival mode, but to
dream bigger.
To dream bigger. And, there's this saying that you can take the girl out of Romania, but you cannot take Romania out of the girl. And I could say the same thing with communism, right? You can take people out of communism, but you cannot take the communism out of the people. And there's things that I need to work on.
Yeah, it's a very valid and wise observation. And I do think people have said it often takes generations to break that, because there are these chains to the past that hold us in this legacy mindset. Obviously, there's people that proceed faster than others. Even within your family, I can see, right? Your brother was the youngest, and probably had a different experience than you guys being older, that were more aware of the early moments and things. And so even just those few years can make a big difference.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely generationally. One other thing related that I do want to touch on before we move on or close is this transition that you and I made when we moved from Romania to the U.S. And I had a job that was very seamless, but you came without a job. And this mindset that you and I both had that we talk about looking back, we're like, what were we thinking? But like you spent, I don't know how long, you probably do know, sending out resumes, filling out applications, looking at job boards, talking to people, looking for an office job, because that's what you came from and what you thought you needed to go into.
Yes.
And neither of us had had the vision to say, hey, let's start a business. Let's do something different. Let's invest in whatever. I don't know what that is, but the ability to expose ourselves to new ideas and even network with people and have this can open the mind in such a way. But yeah, outside of that, so many of us just stay in this tunnel vision of
what I remember is also, and what I'm reflecting back in the early years when I moved to US, it's also I dealt with a lot of head trash, I knew my background was in an administrative assistant role in Romania, and that's what I knew what to do. And I wanted to get an office job moving here. And I was totally paralyzed. I had a tunnel vision. Yeah. I would send resumes out there, and it felt like in a black hole. Like nobody would reply, or these headhunters would reply, then I wouldn't hear back. And I remember this. One of the family members was telling me, you need to start having a job. You need to start working. And I thought, nobody's hiring me in an office.
Right.
What can I do?
Right.
I can go clean homes, or I can go babysitting. But I had this head trash in my head. But my husband is the head of logistics in Microsoft. And if people would ask, what does your wife do? And I'm like, she's a babysitter. she's cleaning. But in my mind, that was the only thing. That was the only option that I had. Instead of saying, I'm going to start my own business, I'm going to hire a cleaning crew and starting my own business in the area that we lived.
Yeah.
Today, it's easy. Why not? Today, it's easy to think that way. But back then, I was totally paralyzed, dealing with a lot of head trash, obviously not getting any responses and not being hired in a timely manner. It felt like a rejection. So there was many things going on.
Spirals down.
Yes. And hearing so many ideas today, it's like, why did I not think about that? But my mind was totally shut down and was totally closed to creativity, to new ideas.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the money story and our limiting beliefs and those kind of things can really limit us quite literally. But yeah, fortunately, we had a series of life events that allowed us to wake up and forge a different path. And there's nothing wrong with either path. I just enjoy the creative side of starting businesses and investing differently and having our freedoms that we enjoy today. But man, I'm grateful for my corporate career as well, for all the things that it blessed me with, and skill sets and friendships and things like that. And if I had it to do over again, I don't know if I would have done it differently. I would like to think that maybe I would have overlapped the two, and we started a business or a side hustle or investing while salary was coming in, and we could enjoy and use all that. But hey, worked out the way it did.
What has been your biggest shift in your money story that you had to take?
For me, it's really about investing. I would say, quite simply, if I boiled it down, my early years were about saving. Even as a young adult, it was savings oriented. I did in the I think it was around 1996 or so when the internet started growing, and I did invest in a basket of technology stocks. America Online, Amazon, eBay. I think those were kind of my big three. And they took off. And I was still in a time of debt. We were renting. Actually, I think we did have a home at that point. And then we moved to Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I cashed all that in as a down payment on a bigger house. And, so I took away my investments that were appreciating to invest to buy debt, essentially, right? A doodad. And so at some point, I would say in the 2007-8 timeframe when I was in Romania, and I think you had a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad that I reread, it just awakened that spark of, I think Romania wasn't the right place for us, or I didn't feel like it was the right place for me to buy a rental property or a rent home or something, because it was a fixed amount of time. But it did awaken that. But then I think life happens, right? So we moved back to the U.S. and we didn't really, that would have been a great opportunity to buy more rental properties because the market was a little bit depressed. We had disposable income coming in, a lot of disposable income. And so, but over the years, it's been more about that, right? We invest in ourselves, we invest in business, we invest in multifamily assets.
Yes.
Hits and misses, I mean, it's a painful journey sometimes because the misses can be big if your investments don't work out. But it's really, I think, cultivating that concept of putting your money to work for you.
Yes.
And there's so many ways to do that these days. Even though I know you and I struggle with totally letting go within our business and investing in people and other things. It's still hard to let go and say, am I going to get the value for this $3,000 a month or $5,000 a month or whatever? But I do think the land business especially has been so overwhelmingly positive with our investments. Like, I mean, when you can invest money and get 100% returns on a annual basis, right? Net 4x, 6x, 10x your investment. I mean, I think that has just really spoiled us in many ways, but that's probably been the biggest change for me. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I do have a bigger taste for it, I would say. And you?
I think for me it was super deep, very deep rooted in me, that making money is not for everybody. Making money is for an elite group of people. And the biggest shift is that
making large amounts of money, you mean, like
not
more than just
large,
a salary,
but yes, but making money, living a very comfortable life. And obviously from there on, making a lot of money. It's not for everybody. That was the biggest shift. Like, money is abundant. The opportunities are there for everybody. We just have to tap into them. And, knowing now what I know now, there's so much, our limiting beliefs are so strong. It really, it really boils down to what happens in between our ears and what we believe about money. But the opportunities are there for everybody. There is no scarcity, and there are no favorites.
Love it. Let's crush it.
Let's crush it.
All right. I hope you enjoyed it. This was fun. At least it was for me. Don't know about you, but made you cry. No, this was fun. I hope you had some good takeaways. Wherever you are in life, know there can be more. There's never been a better time, I believe, to be alive than right now with all the resources available that we have and abilities to do so many different things. But thanks for joining this special edition of the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. Until we see you again, we wish you nothing but the best.